Hello, I'm Mary Ito, and welcome to the CRAM podcast. CRAM is an acronym for Communicating Research and More, which is what we try and do on this podcast. A lot of exciting research and groundbreaking ideas never reach the public, but they have the potential to change the way we think and act. How healthy do you feel? Now, you may find this hard to believe, but that simple question is an astounding indicator of longevity. According to Dr. Alex Jadad, thousands of studies have been conducted using this question on people from all walks of life, and the results have been groundbreaking. We're going to talk about that and some of the other startling facts about health with Alex Jadad, a physician, educator, innovator. I've known him for a number of years, and I also like to think of him as a disruptor of the status quo and some long-held beliefs that we have had about health and how we can achieve it. Alex is a pioneer of evidence-based medicine, end-of-life care, and digital health. He's also the creator of the renowned Jadad Scale, which was the first validated tool to assess the quality of clinical trials. He's written 12 books, including his latest that he wrote with daughter Tamen Jadad-Garcia. And the goal of this book is right in the title, Healthy No Matter What. Alex Jadad joins us. Alex, thanks so much for coming on the podcast.
Mary, what a joy. Thank you for the opportunity.
Oh, you're most welcome. So I want to start off and I want to ask the simple question that you posed to a very high-level meeting. It was to celebrate the World Health Organization's 60th anniversary. And the question was, what is health?
The first thing I would like those who are listening to us, watching us now, is to hear the question and to notice that immediately it appears silly. I know what health is. After a few seconds, it's not that straightforward. And that is what happened to me a few months before that event, when I found myself as a patient in my own hospital with the possible diagnosis of colon cancer. By the way, the cancer was ruled out. But while that was happening, I had a lot of tests. And one day I asked the question, would it be possible to have cancer and be healthy? And that question sounded very silly to me, coming from my inner voice. But then that led to that very question to answer. Is it possible to be healthy with cancer? It's essential to answer the question, what is health? So all that came to my head was the WHO definition that had been written in the Constitution of the World Health Organization in 1948. This happened in 2008. And that definition goes as follows, and that's what most medical students or health professionals would learn when they are going through their studies. Health is a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not just the absence of disease or infirmity. So I was at that meeting of the World Health Organization, or when we were celebrating the 60th birthday of the World Health Organization. And by that time, it was clear to me that definition didn't work, because who could claim to have complete physical, mental, and social well-being? You're wearing glasses. You cannot be healthy.
Mm-hmm.
Even if you want to go to the toilet and you feel a bit uncomfortable, you don't have complete well-being. If you're worried about a family member, you don't have complete well-being. So by definition, you would be not healthy. So I couldn't help it. There was a mic there, and I just said, what is health? And at the beginning, there was a bit of laughter in the room. And then I waited, and somebody just gave me the WHO definition. I said, okay, raise your hand. There were hundreds of people in the audience. If you have complete physical, mental, and social well-being. One person raised his hand and he was wearing glasses, and I said, sorry. Okay, and that began a beautiful adventure supported by the British Medical Journal that enabled me to invite the world to answer that question. And we need to thank a team in the Netherlands who was inspired by this global conversation and hosted a group of us in The Hague. So what we have proposed to the world is to view health as an ability, the ability to adapt when we face the inevitable challenges that present to us throughout our lives. So health as the ability to adapt when we are trying to face inevitable challenges in life. And the key term here is to thrive. So if I asked you a crucial question that has immense power to judge your level of health, I think we will be able to answer the question. So, Mary, in general, how would you rate your health? Would you rate it as poor, fair, good, very good, or excellent?
I would say excellent.
There you go. And you're wearing glasses. So you have an eye disease or two, and you are considering your health to be excellent. And this question that takes a few seconds to be answered, by the way, somehow reflects many things that are happening at the same time inside ourselves and in our relationship with our surroundings, to the point that it even reflects the behavior of more than 50 biomarkers, more than 50 things that we could measure in our blood that could be reflecting other things that are happening not so well in our bodies.
This is what I find so interesting, that a subjective answer, right, that I'm giving, because it's me that's giving the answer and I say excellent, is speaks more truth than perhaps, let's say, a doctor who looks at me in a physical exam and sends me off for some tests, and I get an MRI done and I get a bunch of different tests. My answer could actually speak more truth than the results of all these tests, in his opinion.
It's incredible. We have looked at data from more than 2 million people in over 120 countries. There are over 4,000 publications that look at that question and the answers that we give to that question. One that is very telling is a study from the United States published in 2022 with data from more than 700,000 Americans. And people who rated their health as poor lived 23 years less than those who rated their health as excellent at age 40. 23 years. That question. We have data showing that people living with cancer who rate their health as good, very good, or excellent have 3 times the chances of surviving over the next 3 years than those who rate their health as poor or fair. So it's really incredible. And so it indicates that somehow we have almost like an internal barometer that enables us to integrate information from multiple sources, internal and external, that allow us to synthesize, to sum up all those inputs, all those signals into that answer to that apparently simple question.
Well, when I read this, I was startled by this information, and it made me wonder. I mean, going back to your cancer example, because it's sort of a head scratcher, right? How can someone who has cancer consider their health is excellent, and then they go on to live, 3 times longer than someone who felt their health was poor, right? How is that possible? So it makes me wonder about what's going on with the mental aspect of this and feeling healthy, with our psychological, emotional, social side of things.
Well, in a way, our capacity to answer the question is a cognitive exercise. It's a mental. You have to make a judgment of many things that we may never be able to understand. And there is a lot of research going on in this area, perhaps not as much as we would like to see happening. So it has a heavy mental element. And by the way, the mental component could be teased out into three buckets. It has some emotional elements, it has some intellectual cognitive elements, and it has some behavioral elements as well. But at the end of the day, it's a mental exercise that is fundamentally cognitive. Okay, it requires judgment. And yes, you see, studies show that it predicts whether people would end up in the emergency room or spending more money than others. It's really very exciting to see how we are equipped with tools that allow us to reveal, to uncover things that otherwise would be invisible. And this could be a great complement to what health professionals have to offer. And one of our invitations is to pay more attention to that. So, for example, if you feel off, this is another thing that we highlight in our book. If you feel off, okay, that somehow things are not right, ask yourself that question. How would I rate my health? Is it poor, fair, good, very good, or excellent? If the answer is poor or fair, please consider it an emergency. Okay? Because there may be something there that could increase your chances of dying before you're meant to. Okay? The chances of a premature death. And in those cases, you might need professional support.
Right. So if someone was to rate their health, let's say as poor, right? Are you asking them to consider generally how they feel? I mean, it's not just in that moment, is it? Because I'm wondering when a person answers that question as poor, what are they taking into account? Are they taking into account just that moment? Are they taking into account their life and how they felt, the last 10 years? Like what's going into that answer?
Mm-hmm. So there is very little work, very little research on that. So we decided to ask people. So we had the opportunity to work with a massive organization that has about 3 million people affiliated with more than 90,000 companies. And we had the opportunity to work very closely with them and with their employees. So we learned a lot. So when people were giving their ratings, their own ratings of their own levels of health, then we asked two other questions, which are crucial. It's okay, I rate my health as poor or fair. Okay, that's the concerning. We consider that as negative levels of health. The next question is, why? Okay, why am I rating it like that? And again, it's like a little bit of a flashlight on your life that you see, that you point at your own life and say, okay, why? Why did I say poor or fair? Okay, and that varies. That really changes from person to person. But if it is something that worries you, that is acute, that has very little time, okay, as the experience, that is getting worse, that may be signaling something that requires immediate intervention by a health professional. Okay? Sometimes it may be overwhelming distress. You may have a big family problem, and that is causing a lot of anxiety, and that would be enough to lower your levels of self-reported health. And that leads to the third question. The third question is, what do I need to happen for my health to switch from a negative level, which is poor or fair, to a positive level, which is good, very good, or excellent? And usually the answer to that third question complements the picture very nicely. Okay, because one, you have your own rating. Second, you have some clues from yourself as to what motivated that, and it gives you some guidance as to what to do next.
But are you saying that the person themselves knows how to answer that third question? Do we really know?
Yeah, very much. And yes, and we have asked this question. One of the meta questions, one of the additional questions we had was, what are the limitations to answer that question? Okay? So, of course, if you have some cognitive problems, if you have an emergency, you are run over by a car, you have many broken bones, that's not the time to say, how would you rate your health? Or how do I rate my health? That's obvious, okay? If you have some major problems with mental with a mental disorder.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you have schizophrenia,
Mm-hmm.
something like that. Okay, that would not be appropriate. But we have gone all the way to children as young as 7 years of age, and they are able to answer the 3 questions. Children, 7 years of age. We have asked the question to people who are illiterate. They are unable to read or write, and they're able to answer the question. So there is much more room.
What you're saying then, Alex, what I'm gathering is we know what's good or wrong with us, and we also know how to fix it. Is that what you're saying?
We have the capacity to assess much more than we tend to think we are.
Okay.
On the one hand.
Right.
And 2, we also have the capacity to uncover, to reveal things that could be very relevant to our health and our longevity by asking ourselves questions. It may not be enough. Okay, this doesn't replace the knowledge of a medical professional or a health professional in general. You see, we're not talking about replacing. We are talking about the fact that we have abilities that are usually underutilized or undervalued. And the time has come, because we have plenty of evidence, to pay more attention to them, to value them more, and to use them to our advantage in conjunction with other things. In many cases, you don't need anybody else to deal with the reasons behind negative levels of health. Okay, you may need more sleep, for example. Okay, I haven't been sleeping well for... Okay, I can do it. So you don't need somebody else to do it. You see?
But and that made me wonder if we are so good at understanding, like fundamentally understanding, what our, I guess, health is and what possibly we might need to do to improve it. What's the role of the doctor then? Like what? Why do?
Fantastic question. In fact, we have now a project that is titled "What is Medicine?" and what is the role of doctors and physicians. As a physician myself, it's not that clear. And this may be yet another fundamental question that requires attention. And I have joined forces with 3 young physicians, female physicians, by the way, who I had the fortune to accompany as a professor, as a mentor. And now we have joined forces and we are trying to answer this question and seeking allies who might be interested in going for it. What is disease? Is another major question that we haven't, tackled with the degree of attention that it deserves. So yeah, these are very interesting questions. What we know is that there is a role for the medical profession, for sure. Okay, there is a role, and there is a role for non-medical things. So when we ask people, what do you need to stay in positive health or to switch from negative to positive, the answer is that more than 90% of the time, medical intervention is not needed. But the 10% is very important, especially when we are dealing with things that could be cured.
Okay, so for example, yeah.
And that could be cured through the participation of people with specialized knowledge who could do things that are not available to me or to people who don't have health professional background in my life. You have an infection, a serious one, you need surgery, you need intensive care, for a condition from which you can recover, or you have very complex chronic conditions that usually feed each other and make each other worse. So yes, there are for curing the curable, beyond what is available to you, okay, because there are many things that we can cure by ourselves. A cold is an example. We have mechanisms within our bodies that can get rid of most colds. Okay? So, and you could say you are cured from your cold. But there are cases in which the medical system, and it's extremely important to use it. We're not saying ignore it, leave it aside, there is no room for that. What we don't know yet, that clearly, is what is the boundary between the role of medicine and where medicine is the only and the main answer to a factor that, or a multiple series of factors that are behind a negative level of health.
Yeah, and I'm curious to know, Generally speaking, do people tend to answer the question of how do I feel? Is that something they tend to answer positively or negatively? Do you know, is there more?
Yeah, more
Yeah,
than in
yeah,
Canada. Yeah, we have data from pretty much every country in the
yeah.
world because there is something called the health status of the population. And that is usually the first question that you see if you go to the OECD database. Countries have to report, if you're a member of the OECD, this club of countries that collaborate and cooperate around economic development, you have the figures. So in Canada, if you ask this question, more than 80% of people would say good, very good, or excellent.
Does that surprise you? Because it does surprise me. I mean, considering, even in your book, you talk about the fact that the medical system has kind of medicalized all kinds of conditions, right? Where, even being pregnant, we used to have a baby at home and we thought that was just sort of a natural process. And then somehow or other, it kind of became medicalized, right? And we needed all these different interventions and you needed to go to the hospital and you needed to get this done and that done. So I'm wondering whether because of the more and more interventions and the naming of certain conditions as being not normal, has that caused people to feel that, oh, you know what, maybe my health isn't the best. Maybe I'm actually not doing so well. But in fact, you're saying no, 80% of people do think they're doing okay or very well.
And not only that, more than that, if you ask people with one chronic condition, diabetes, arthritis, if you ask them to rate their health, 75 to 80% of them would say good, very good, or excellent.
What do you make of that?
So
what do you?
two-thirds of people with cancer that has spread throughout their bodies who know that the cancer is incurable would say my health is good, very good, or excellent. Why? Because now we can separate disease from health. You see, that's the beauty. Okay, if you say to somebody, do you have a disease? And all of them have been diagnosed with cancer, everybody would say, yes, 100%, I have disease. But asking that question is different from how would you rate your health? You see, because then our mind focuses on something else that takes into account the disease. In many cases, people say my health is poor or fair because I have incurable cancer. Okay, but that would be 1 out of 3 people with incurable cancer. But 2/3 of them would say is good, very good, or excellent. And then you ask them why. Okay, because I don't have pain, I can do everything I want to do, because I have love in my life, because I have found more meaning, you see, because I have a purpose now, because I can taste things better than before. And this is the kind of answers that you get. And yet, okay, there is cancer, there is a diagnosis of cancer, but we are starting to separate this. There are some people who have no diagnosis of any disease, and you ask them to rate their health, and they say poor or fair. And you say, why? Okay, they said, well, I feel lonely. And loneliness is not a disease, and yet it affects a lot of people and kills. We have data from more than 3 million people showing that loneliness may be killing as many people as smoking 15 cigarettes a day would. Okay, but we would not regard loneliness as a disease. And they don't have diabetes, they don't have cancer, it's loneliness.
That's astonishing. So, when you were talking, what was going through my mind, of course, was the definition. And you're right, it does fit the definition because the person who has cancer, if they feel good about their health, then I guess they were able to adapt, right? They were able to adapt to their situation.
Exactly.
The person who's lonely, who rates their health as being poor, they're unable to adapt to that loneliness in their life.
Yeah, this is why this concept of health is so important, because it's related to disease but not dependent on disease, and it opens many possibilities for us to be healthy, as we wrote, no matter what. We have example of survivors of concentration camps who were thriving despite the fact that they endured incredible experiences, horrifying experiences. What I just described, people with incurable cancer. So this focus on our ability to adapt is very powerful. But we need to believe that that's the case. We need to believe that health is an ability. We need to believe that we have the capacity to judge it. And we need to believe that the key is adaptability, and that there are many ways for us to adapt, that in a way we are equipped with many powerful mechanisms to adapt. Okay? And by adapting, again, I mean the capacity to change in response to the inevitable challenges we face through life and thrive.
Right.
And thrive.
So I want to talk a little bit about when we're not able to adapt, because you spend a good part of your book about that. A lot of our adaptation is it's internal mechanisms that we're not even aware of, right? We don't even consciously know that we're adapting.
Now we may be breathing many viruses, and we don't even notice because we have a lot of mechanisms, defense mechanisms that deal with them. And we don't have to worry. We have environmental mechanisms. We have air conditioning, for example, now, that allow us to keep our temperature more stable. And that is an adaptive mechanism that we have created to help us. Yes. But in many cases, we are unable to adapt, or we respond in ways that are maladaptive, that end up being worse than the challenge itself.
Well, you talk about something called toxic stress load. Can you speak about that and why that is so important to consider?
To me, this was a huge insight, because we're looking at a lot of evidence. And as an epidemiologist that I am also, you are used to seeing studies that show that the social determinants of health lead to poorer health and poorer outcomes. Okay, so if you're poor, if your education level is low, if you are, all those usual things. But then we were starting to see studies showing that groups that were meant to have advantages also were experiencing a premature death. There is a 90-year study, for example, of executives, corporate people. And the leaders of the organization lived 3 to 5 years less than other people in their teams at lower ranks. Gold medalists in the Olympics live 1 year less than those who come second, than the silver medalists. Physicians, I mean, this really shocked me. I knew that this was a problem until we went deeper with Tamen into the literature. We tend to kill ourselves more than the general population. If you are a male physician, you have 40% more chances of dying by suicide than if you are a male who is not a physician. If you're a woman, it's even worse. Female physicians have twice the risk of dying by suicide than non-medical, non-physician females in their own groups. So what's going on here? So we dug deeper and deeper, and we have been doing this for a while. And we said we need to share it because now we have more than enough evidence to go public with this, because this has been with us for a while. And we call it the toxic stress load. And I think there is a lot in that name. This is, in a way, the scars, the baggage that we accumulate through our lives as we respond to the inevitable challenges that we face. So there is a price that we pay, and this accumulates, and nobody can escape from it. Nobody. So if you, and we have now data to back this up, and the data are growing behind this. There are at least 8 variables, and they are backed on evidence about longevity and self-reported health. And we have focused on variables that are modifiable, things that you can change in your life, because there are some others that in theory you could change. But it would be very hard, like your socioeconomic status, of course. And there are studies in the US that are shocking. there was a study of the 500 largest cities in the US showing that within the same city, in 55 of these cities, Chicago in particular, a baby born in two neighborhoods could expect to live 30 years less than another baby born at the same time, just 10 miles away. And in 55 cities of the US, the difference was between 20 and 30 years. Okay, we are talking about San Francisco, Washington, D.C., New York City. Okay, so in those cases, we have usually those things that are very hard to change. Okay, like the race label that you get, the sex assigned to you at birth, your socioeconomic status, where you live, your postal code has a huge effect. So we have focused on those things that you can change, even if you live under those circumstances. And we have identified 8 variables. One is your self-reported health. That's at the top of the pile because of the evidence we have behind that. Okay? So if your self-reported health is negative, worry, because you are likely to be dealing with high toxic stress load, and that baggage will likely accelerate your aging process and kill you early. Okay? But then we have loneliness following very closely. We have the number of people you trust in your life as another one. If you have 3 or more people that you trust, you are more likely to have low toxic stress load, because that enables you to cope and to adapt much more easily. Financial worries, for example, and on and on and on. Okay? If you have distress coming from family problems, if you have poor sleep quality, if you have distress at work, if you have 3 or more chronic diseases, these variables add up a lot to that load. So, and we discovered that if you and we created an index, and we have a tool that will be wonderful to share with those who are listening or watching us now. We have an evidence-based tool available, free on the internet, that people can use to monitor their levels of TSA.
So, Alex, what about work stress? I mean, there are all kinds of stresses, but why do you consider that one to be one we really need to pay attention to?
Yeah, our research has shown again that there are 8 major variables that are very frequent, for which we have a lot of evidence behind, and they can be modified. And 7 of the 8 tend to be protective, but one in particular is very dangerous, and it's exactly the one that you are mentioning. It's work-related stress. If you consider your level of stress at work, or in relation to what's happening at work, as moderate, severe, or extreme, this is very closely associated with moderate and high levels of toxic stress. And toxic stress load that comes from 2 very deeply studied topics. One is called toxic stress, and the other one is called allostatic load. And this has to do with what happens to you when you're exposed to challenges, especially serious challenges over a long period of time, or the price that you pay responding to those challenges. This is why we call it the toxic stress load. We have taken into account the third one, and this seems to be something that we have inherited from our ancestors over thousands of years. We seem to be the children of the paranoid, those who survived challenges because they noticed things that could kill them early enough and responded well enough to them to survive. So, and here we are. So we tend to develop anxiety and hypervigilance. We become hyper alert. And somehow what happens within the workplace has more serious consequences in terms of loading our than protective value. And we have seen, for example, there is evidence that if you have poor quality sleep and work-related stress, your chances of dying of a heart-related problem triple. So somehow there is the combination of variables that feed the toxic stress load seems to be crucial, and they feed each other. They feed each other and make it worse. And what we consider the sentinel one is work-related distress. And sleep. Seems to be an early signal, almost like an early alarm that your toxic stress load is building up. And we have evidence that indicates that your level of toxic stress load can anticipate the traditional risk factors. So by, again, asking yourself a series of questions and answering them, we have what is clearly an upstream composite risk factor, because it's a combination of variables that lead to this factor, and upstream that, if not noticed, it will lead to overweight or unhealthy weight, obesity, high blood pressure, high sugar levels. You understand, these kind of things that then lead to the killers: heart disease, heart attacks, strokes, cancer, depression, suicide. So we believe that, again, just as with self-reported health, we have an opportunity to judge what's happening and to notice things early enough to do something about them. The toxic stress load could be very, very powerful to do things at an early point and save lives, our own and other people's lives, earlier as well, sooner.
So let me just ask you, let's say, I mean, the best thing would be if we could just get out of that stress, right? That's the work stress, but it's not always that easy. So let's just say we're not able to get out of the work situation that is causing us stress. What can we do to offset the stress that is being caused to us when we're at work?
There are many mechanisms, many tools, many methods available for us to deal with this. One that is particularly interesting to us is called cognitive bias modification, because our biases tend towards the negative. So we tend to interpret things negatively, and to perceive things as catastrophic, especially when the level of distress is high. So there are very simple exercises, even sentences, okay, with incomplete parts that you need to fill with a positive word instead of a negative word.
So, for example,
okay, so you have an office party. Your boss approaches you and says, okay, Mary, I think that your work is blank. Okay? Your immediate reaction may say, crap, terrible. And then you feel it satisfactory, excellent, okay? Whatever.
spectacular.
Or you take a scene. It could be a scene. You're walking on the street and you find, okay, a box. When you open it, the box has, okay, you could say a rat, okay, or a bomb, but you can say a beautiful flower. Okay, you understand? So you change the meaning and the sense of that scenario from something negative to positive. And if you do that enough times, you start to become trained on how to respond to signals that would be neutral or irrelevant, that you would perceive negatively, in positive or constructive ways.
Yeah. And is the thing with this cognitive behavior modification, are you supposed to do it in the time of anxiety, or are you supposed to do this on a regular basis, regardless of whether
there is a growing body of research trying to give us a much better understanding of how this works. It's almost like training yourself to interpret situations in neutral or constructive ways, rather than in negative, destructive, alarming ways. So you can calibrate. This is not to end up living in la la land, and you understand, and ignoring threatening signals. No, it's to take off the unnecessary worry that comes from our inherited tendency to respond negatively to situations and to catastrophize. We also focus on something that we call the self-destructive force.
Yes, I'm glad you brought that up.
We seem to be the only species, at least that we know of, that is able to build a trap, bait it, and then going into it. So to be able to protect ourselves from ourselves, other people in our lives is crucial. People who are willing and able to tell us what we need to hear rather than what we want to hear. And we consider those either a personal board of directors with regular meetings where they have your best interest at heart, or even families by choice. But something as seemingly simple as exploring a hobby could help overcome loneliness, which is one of the biggest causes of high toxic stress load and premature mortality. And technology now enables almost any person who may be lonely to find at least another person who shares the same interest almost anywhere else in the world. And just by finding that other person, thanks to technology, because you may not have that person in the city in which you live or even in your city, but far away, you see technology now is enabling you to overcome a challenge, to deal with a challenge and to adapt and experience positive.
I'm really glad you brought up that self-destructive force that humans have, because I'm reading your book and so much of it makes sense. It really does, right? Um, we have the knowledge, obviously. We have the evidence to back a lot of these behaviors up, how long have we known about obesity, losing weight, right? We should eat better nutritionally. Yes, it's good if we can see our family and friends, and yet we don't do it, right? So many of us don't do these things. Why? Like, what is going on there? Because I know earlier you said to think negatively, there was a benefit to that. There was a strong evolutionary benefit, right? Because, there could be a tiger in the bush, or, I'm not feeling well. Oh, I better do something about this because this could be fatal. But now, has that become maladaptive for us? Like, do we become our own worst enemies?
Yes, and in part, it seems, again, this is another exciting area of research. In part, it's the legacy we have received, and it's all over the place. This is widely known that we have the tendency to do anything that would help us increase our deposits of energy. So before, calories were hard to find. Now we have an excess of calories around. But the tendency to accumulate by eating these sugary or fatty things and all that remains. So that's part of it. That's part of it. But also, you see, we are exposed to media that in a context that promotes overconsumption. Okay? So a lot of the problems that we describe have to do with addictions, shop addiction, you see, buying stuff, gambling. These are things that end up hurting us, that are not necessarily associated with those, you see, millenary legacies. So, but there may be things that go deeper. There may be deep psychological things going on, and Freud called it thanatos. The tendency that we seem to have towards what is lethal, eros and thanatos. We even hypothesize that there may be things in the environment that could be affecting us. Okay, there may be mechanisms from Gaia. See this theory proposed by James Lovelock and Margulis, saying that the Earth itself is a living organism that is defending from us because we are threatening it. So there may be invisible things that we don't understand or even perceive that are influencing our behavior and our way of thinking. So we act against ourselves because we could be the most effective factor to control the damage that we are causing to other living entities around the globe. So there are many, many hypotheses. What is clear is two things. Yes, in many cases, we are hurting ourselves. And two, we cannot do it alone. In those cases, we need support from others, and we need support from people who have our best interest at heart. And by the way, we could do it for other people as well, because in many cases, we can notice those behaviors in others, and we can be of value to others much more than to ourselves. So this is another opportunity for that witness to show its power, to increase our capacity to adapt and to deal with inevitable challenges. In this case, the challenges that we create for ourselves or to ourselves.
Yeah. Oh, we've just really just scratched the surface. There's so much in your book. If you could just leave one more message with people, something that they could act upon, what would you say?
The first one is a belief. You see, C.S. Lewis said, we are what we believe. So usually part of our life has been devoted to evidence-based medicine, which is, in a nutshell, you need to see to believe. You need to see evidence to believe. In this case, the message is the other way around. Believing is seeing, because there is plenty of evidence. But unless we believe that health is an ability, that there is something like the toxic stress load that could be detected very early so we can intervene, and that there is a lot that we can do to improve our chances of a healthy and long life. Okay? Unless we believe that that's the case, there is very little that could happen. So the main message is there is an opportunity to give ourselves permission to believe that we have a lot at our disposal to live a healthy and long life, no matter what.
Fantastic. And of course, I've got to end off and ask you, are you still living out of one suitcase?
Yes.
No. Gosh. Oh, okay. How many years has it been now?
I think
How many
15
years?
now.
15 years. So I'm just going to quickly say, so when I did an interview with you, it was probably about 12 years ago or so. You had made a decision a few years before that you were going to live out of 2 suitcases, all your belongings, everything, you and your wife, your family, you sold your house, you moved. Everybody was living out of suitcases, 2 suitcases, but then you told me you actually got it down to 1 suitcase.
So the 2 suitcases, 15 years. The 1 suitcase,
15 years.
I would say probably 8 years now.
And how's it going?
It's wonderful, because that has been a mechanism to deal with a sense of enoughness, which is another thing that we seem to be equipped with. We seem to have that other inner sense that allows us to judge how much is too much, how much is enough, and how much is too little. So by having 1 or 2 suitcases, what we did as a family was to invite ourselves to judge what was essential for us, and to make choices. So in my case, I said, how far can I push it? And one suitcase is enough for me.
I love it. You're going to have to write another book called One Suitcase is Enough. I think that's a great
Thank you very much. That's a great.
Thank you so much, Alex. It was just a joy speaking with you. All the best with your book and your work.
Mary, it's a wonderful pleasure. Thank you for the opportunity to share some of these ideas with you and with those who will be listening to us and watching this conversation.
Thank you. Well, you certainly walk the talk, Alex. My guest has been Alex Jadad. He is a physician, educator, philosopher, and innovator, a pioneer of evidence-based medicine. He has led large-scale efforts to shape the future of health and medicine. His latest book with daughter and co-author Tamen Jadad-Garcia is called Healthy No Matter What: How Humans Are Hardwired to Adapt. If you'd like to know more about Alex and his work, please check out our show notes. That is it for the CRAM podcast today. We hope you enjoyed it. Our thanks to the Temerty Foundation for their generous support. Please follow us on social @CRAM Ideas is our handle. See you next time.